Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Philip Osteen, Dean of the University of Utah College of Social Work. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Social Work Beyond the Classroom presentation. As the name of the series suggests, these presentations allow us to delve into the work that engages our faculty members outside of their teaching duties and to provide additional learning opportunities for students, graduates, and others in the community. We welcome our virtual attendees and thank you for making time to join us live and to those who are watching this in the future. We also express our sincere gratitude to those who donated while registering. These donations will support the James C. and Lucille P. Hunter Scholarship, which private donors Rosie and Paul Hunter established to support BSW, MSW, and PhD students who are interested in international immigrant and refugee issues. To everyone who donated, again, thank you. Before we get to today's presentation, on behalf of the College of Social Work, I want to begin by acknowledging that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the endearing relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples in their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. Today, we are thrilled to highlight Dr. Tiffany Baffour's work as the lead planner for the Fall Break 2025 Learning Abroad trip to Ghana, exploring social and political culture. In this presentation, Dr. Baffour will offer valuable insights into Ghana's social welfare system and providing an overview of its history and current landscape. Dr. Baffour is an associate professor here in the University of Utah College of Social Work. She earned her PhD from Howard University and has more than 25 years of experience in teaching, curriculum development, direct practice, advocacy, research, and administrative leadership in the fields of social work and organizational development. At both local and national levels, Dr. Baffour's research and services focused on the areas of anti-racist and inclusive pedagogy, violence prevention, health and mental health disparities, and community-based participatory research. She served as an inaugural member of the board of directors from the Hughes McCluskey Center for Violence Prevention and chaired the Council on Social Work Education's Council on Professional Development and Conferences. Dr. Baffour received the 2022 Madam C.J. Walker Resource Award from the Black Culture Center at the University of Utah, recognizing her efforts to strengthen community-engaged learning experience and opportunities for civic engagement at the university and beyond. And with that, Tiffany, the stage is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, colleagues and students. It's really just such a great pleasure to be here today and to welcome you all to this presentation. Just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to cover today, we're going to highlight the educational and cultural value of the Ghana Learning Abroad experience. And I'll talk today a little bit about the program that we're developing here in the College of Social Work that is set for relaunch in fall of 2025. So October of this year, we'll be taking a group for the first time actually since 2017. We'll explore through this webinar the role of cultural humility in social work education and practice, which is, we know it's just a critical part of what we all do as social workers. We'll apply a strengths-based perspective to international social work, as well as guide students, faculty, and professionals through the application process, as well as discuss professional benefits for participation. So to kick us off, I just wanted to start off a little bit and talk about the trip itself and a bit about the itinerary, and then I'll kind of weave in some of these other pieces. So we'll start off in Accra, Ghana, which is the capital city. I liken it to the New York City of Africa. It's a really a bustling place. There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot to do. There's a really bustling, sort of life around the city. There are lots of cafes and cool restaurants and tourist attractions and nightlife. So I feel like whatever your interests are, you can really find it here in the capital city. It's, again, just such a really culturally enriching and fun place. So we'll start our trip off in Accra. and we'll actually land here in Accra at the airport. And we're staying at one of the really nice hotels downtown. So great food again at the hotel as well. A nice place to relax as we kind of have a respite before we travel on day 2 to Kumasi, which is going to be the site of much of the educational pieces of this particular trip. Um, so on day 2, we start off in the morning with a cultural tour of Accra, and then we'll fly to Kumasi, which is a 45-minute flight. Then we'll just sort of relax for the rest of the day, have dinner, and then that Monday morning we'll start with our educational activities. And I have a picture here of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, which has been a tremendous partner to the College of Social Work here at the University of Utah. I was just sharing with our dean when we met last week that I learned from our colleagues when I was just there about a week or two ago that KNUST for short has a very, very long relationship with the University of Utah College of Social Work. And some of our faculty members actually were really instrumental in helping to develop the social work program there. Many of our faculty worked with faculty members there. Some of the faculty members at KNUST flew here to Utah and actually were trained in some pedagogical techniques in the development of their curriculum as they started their social work program in 2016. So some names that may be familiar to you here on our faculty: Joanna Bettman Schaefer, Jason Castillo, who is now currently our Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, were really a part of the core group that helped to develop the social work program at KNUST. So we'll be spending about 3 days there in Kumasi. We'll do some really marvelous tours of some of the community sites. And actually, we've also had some students placed in the past in some of the field sites, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we'll have some lectures and just some opportunities to get together and meet with some of the students, some of the faculty there, and as well as some of the community partners, in addition to actually going out and at the very least, we'll be able to do some volunteer slash observation and shadowing in at least one of the agencies there, which is called Safe Child Advocacy. So I'll get into that a little bit as we move forward. So our plan is to fly to Kumasi. We arrive on a Saturday. We leave for Kumasi on a Sunday afternoon, arrive in the evening, just have a relaxing evening that Sunday, and we'll start our activities again with meeting with faculty, some panel slash lecture presentations, and some visits to some field sites on Monday and Tuesdays, as well as some cultural sites there in Kumasi, which is actually considered the cultural center of the country. So our last stop before we return to Accra will be on Wednesday morning. We'll be departing for Cape Coast in Elmina, which is at the coast of Ghana. And it's just a really interesting place. It's actually the site of many of the slave castles and the transatlantic slave trade. So there's a lot of history here, a lot of interesting places to see. This is a hotel that I visited and I picked for our site where we'll be staying. And it's just such a beautiful place, has an amazing overview of the ocean from here. And it's just so breezy and beautiful. And the food, you can just smell the food, I'm sure, from here. You can smell the food from, all the amazing things that they're cooking there in the kitchen, and just such a great place. So I think again, this will be a great place for respite and relaxation during our trip as well. Um, so again, in Almena, we'll visit some of the cultural sites there, the Almena Castle, the Cape Coast Castle. I have us set up for a boat tour of the area, as well as a trip to Kakum, which is a site where you can actually, there are bridges that you can actually walk across, and you're literally on top of the jungle. So it's really just very interesting to see this site that's really almost dead at the center of the equator, and to look at, you know, a lot of the wildlife, the fauna there. It's just a really, really fun and interesting place. So we'll end our trip um, to Cape Coast and Almena at Kakum, and then we'll return to Accra for the last day. And this map just kind of gives you a bit of an overview. If you look to the left, you'll see Elmina and Cape Coast. To the right of the map, you'll see Accra. And up to the left a little bit to the left, not quite upper part, but sort of midway, you'll see Kumasi. And so again, there's a combination of both road and air travel on this trip. One of the things, I've been to Ghana 3 times now, and the roads can be a bit challenging. So one of the things that we really wanted to save time and to save our own energy is to really have this combination of air and road travel. So folks do get to see um, sort of how folks are living throughout Ghana. You get to see sort of the transformation from some of the rural areas to the urban areas as we're traveling by car. But we do sort of want to think about, you know, sort of maintaining our own energy levels as well, as just kind of getting there quickly. So we did combine the air as well as road travel. And it is a very brief trip, as you can see. The entire trip is about 8 days from the time we leave Salt Lake City to the time we return to Salt Lake City. So we'll spend about 2 days in Accra altogether, a day in Almena, and then about you know, 3 days in Kumasi. So why Ghana? And one of the things I really want to emphasize is the rich and historical and cultural context of Ghana. When you think about the significance to African and global history, especially in relationship to colonialism and independence, and in terms of just Ghana was the first country that received independence from any European country. So it has a great deal of significance in terms of the liberation movements of many other African countries. And Kwame Nkrumah was the first president. And again, our partner institution in Ghana is named after him, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Um, so really, again, a hub for African social and political movements. And there's a lot of interesting things going on in terms of the economy. The Ghanaian people are very industrious people, very entrepreneurial. So everywhere you go, you will see people selling things, which is really interesting. I always joke to say everywhere looks like a walking Walmart. So many of the things that people purchase, they purchase from informal markets or from individuals who are selling them on the streets. So the economy is really set up very differently than the way that we think of in the United States as well. So that's something we'll kind of be covering in both the pre-departure portion of the course. We'll be talking about some of these elements as we prepare for the trip. We have some great lectures set up by some of the faculty there at KNUST while we're there, and then we'll do some wonderful post-departure debriefs as well. So this was actually one of the organizations that I went to visit while I was in Ghana about 2 weeks ago, and it was really interesting. It's called Safe Child Advocacy, and I didn't take pictures of the children. Behind this sign, you'll see a little bit of a tarp, which is outside of the building, and there were lots of children laying down that were resting themselves. Many of them are street children. This particular agency does serve what we call street children, which are predominantly children who either come as migrants or come from the more northern part of the country. And they're coming there to work and to help their families in terms of earning money and then sending most of that money back to the families. And that might benefit the families in a number of ways. Sometimes it helps pay for the education of various family members if they're, paying school fees and they need money for books, or it just may be paying for very basic necessities like food, and other items that the family members need to survive. So there is quite a bit of poverty throughout Ghana, but also in the north is particularly a lot of poverty in that region. So again, you see street children coming from that area, as well as some of the countries that border Ghana to the north. You will see individuals, young individuals coming from those parts and into Kumasi. And then again, this particular agency works to engage them in a number of ways, giving them a place of respite, as I mentioned, just beyond the sign with the tarp. So many of them come there and rest during the day, and take a nap if needed. As we can imagine, it's very, very hot there throughout the year. Another thing that Safe Child Advocacy does is they work with the street children's to reintegrate them into their communities. So that's a really interesting and important part of their work, where they want to work with the children and make sure that they gain some sort of education or trade, whether it's catering or some kind of trade that they can do, like air conditioning, something of that nature, where they can take this education or trade and use that to sort of better themselves in their home community. So reintegration into the home communities is a big part of the work of Safe Child Advocacy as well. They also work with children who are at risk, whether situations like domestic violence and others where children are at risk, human trafficking, as you can see from the sign. They work with children and young people who have been trafficked. They have a residential facility there in Kumasi. I didn't get a chance to see it, but that's in a separate site from this, main building where I was able to visit while I was there. And one of the things that the folks there were telling me when I met with them is, people are coming from communities that are very impoverished, again, particularly in the north. So they're told that, they'll have these opportunities to go abroad. And in fact, that they are being unknowingly recruited as sex workers. So in a lot of cases, people are able to escape in a variety of ways. and organizations such as Safe Child Advocacy are able to work with them and help them receive care, receive counseling, and other kinds of services. Again, they provide some services around education and reintegration for these young people back into their communities. They also have what's called a creche, or as we would call it, a kindergarten, where they originally were servicing individuals who, may have been part of their um, their other programs, and then essentially those individuals, um, maybe there wasn't enough need, so they opened that up to the community. So they have a really amazing program there where individuals are able to bring their children in the community, and there are a variety of needs, as you can imagine. So that's one of the things that I really talked with many of these agencies about when I was there. And that would be, again, a part of some of the work that we're doing in this course, is to think about how we can help meet some of those needs. So, for example, with the creche, there's a huge need for just basic supplies like coloring books, or, crayons and colored pencils. And in one of the hospitals I visited, there's really a dearth around some basic resources like diapers and, formula and things of that nature. So kind of thinking about how we can really help as we're coming to learn, but how can we help and give back to these communities as well, is going to be a huge feature of this trip. And it probably makes sense for those of you who know me, that I'm really extremely passionate about that in particular. Um, so again, I think some of the challenges when we think about social work and community development in Ghana are really around fiscal resources. And I think very similar to what we have here, many of our agencies and our services are not funded as well as we like. In my opinion, I think it's much more dire there, because in many times you have a really, really small amount of staff trying to meet a huge need. So again, one of the things that I'm thinking of as we embark on this trip is, as we're going to these agencies and we're planning to visit at least 4 different sites while we're there. Again, we'll visit this particular site, Safe Child Advocacy. We're planning on doing some immersion / observation and going out into the community with the youth workers there. Um, but we will visit at least 4 agencies, but thinking about how can we be a help? What are the things that we can provide during our brief time there, that can be a resource to social workers and to the service users that are present? One of the things I really like to emphasize is the strengths perspective, and this is really a huge part of our work as social workers, is to really come into communities and really assess strengths. And for me, I see just a huge amount of strengths as I've visited these organizations and communities, that if you're driving around or upon a first look, you might think, wow, people are really struggling. They don't have much, but there's so many strengths in terms of community development, the way people work together in their community, within their families, the way that social workers are so well trained and so passionate about what they are doing, is to me a really huge strength. So, some couple of insights that I have from the planning process, and just to sort of mention, I didn't start off with this, but I took my first trip to Ghana in 2000, and my mother is also a professor. She taught African and African American studies for about 40 years before she retired last year. And so I spent a lot of my time growing up in Africa because her area of study was the political economy of Southern Africa. She's a political scientist. So we actually lived abroad for several years while I was growing up. We lived in Southern Africa in Zimbabwe um, after the colonial period, which was really an interesting time. So just to be clear, I am an American. I was born here. I grew up here. I am from the historical legacy of slavery, and this will make sense as to why I'm bringing this up in a moment as I kind of go through my presentation. But I've been traveling back and forth. Around Africa since literally my childhood. And I feel like Ghana is really my happy place, and I'm just really excited to share it with the students. And hopefully, if there are social workers, professionals that are interested in joining us on this trip, faculty members, field instructors, I'm just all for it, and I'm just really excited to bring our community together and to have folks to be a part of this learning experience. Um, so again, as I sort of reflect on this as, a lifetime of traveling throughout Africa, this was my third time visiting Ghana. Um, it was really moving. You'll see this is a picture of me, and I'm actually at the Cape Coast Castle, which was actually probably one of the most significant sites of the transatlantic slave trade. And this particular castle um, traded hands between many European nations. And then slavery was, as we know, abolished in the mid 1800s. And as I look out this window, I also thought about my ancestors, and that, as I looked out at the view of this castle, this was the last thing they saw as they were leaving the continent and had no idea what was in store for them. So this was really a pensive time, I think, for me as an African American to be able to visit and to see these historic sites. And there's a picture that I didn't put into the presentation, but there's actually a picture of me going through the door of return. So there's the door of no return where individuals entered between that time period of the early 1500s through the mid 1800s, where Africans were enslaved and captured, held here under very inhumane circumstances, and then taken in ships to, as we know, the Americas, to the Caribbean, to South America, to Europe, etc. Um, and so for me, this place has significance in many ways, especially as we kind of think about human trafficking in its current context. And we see that the context has sort of changed over time. But I think there are a lot of parallels to the genocide of African people that happened through the transatlantic slave trade, to what we're seeing currently in many countries across the world in the context of human trafficking. So these are the kinds of things that I really want us to explore as part of this course as well, is sort of looking at some of these differences between historic and contemporary contexts, and also doing some comparative work in terms of what do systems look like in Ghana versus the United States? What are the infrastructure look like? How are they the same? How are they different? Um, so again, I think through our collaborations with Ghanaian institutions and organizations, will be able to do a lot of that work. A lot of the faculty at the Kwame Nkrumah, University of Science and Technology have taught in the U.S. or in Europe, and they really have a strong understanding of these various systems. And I think they're going to really add a lot to the dynamics of our trip. Again, with these academic and experiential components, we're planning again 4 site visits to different community-based organizations, and all of that will happen while we're in Kumasi. One of the key things I want to just mention in terms of travel accommodations and safety is when I started this off, I had so much stuff in this trip because I've been to Ghana 3 times and there's just so much I wanted everyone to see and experience. But because this is such a short trip, I really want to make sure that we're able to enjoy and experience things in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. There's a lot of travel involved. So I was really careful in terms of the planning. As I mentioned a little bit about the itinerary, the accommodations are all great. And I always think of safety as a primary concern. This is another reason why I think Ghana is ideal, particularly vis-a-vis like other parts of either Central or South America or Africa, is that it is relatively safe. I would feel completely safe with students if they were going out at night, if they wanted to explore. And a lot of places, I just quite frankly wouldn't feel that safe if we're taking a group of students abroad and traveling, and just thinking about that element of, people being able to be out by themselves at night and things like that. So these are a lot of things that I sort of took into consideration in the planning of this trip, where we're staying, the accommodations, all of those pieces as well. So just to ensure with anyone who's thinking about coming, that a lot of time and thought went into those elements. And as I mentioned, I'm a very experienced traveler to Ghana, this particular country. Um, so this is actually a picture of myself with the provost as well as the assistant registrar. This was a picture that was taken about 2 weeks ago during my planning trip. And a couple of things that I just really want to mention here, that I think the interaction with the students, with the faculty, with the individuals at the various social service agencies and NGOs that will visit, it's really ripe for I think immersive learning experiences. One of the things that I'm also very cognizant of as a faculty member is, people are coming to this experience with a variety of different places. So this is open to undergraduates, it's open to graduate students, it's open to professionals. So I really want to ensure that everyone's needs are getting met in the development of a trip like this. So there are ways that we can sort of tier or tailor some of the experiences even a little bit more to these various groups. Again, I've been doing some information sessions already about the trip, and we've had some interest among students in other health sciences as well, which is super exciting. Again, I think incredible opportunity for networking, for career development, and also, again, comparative social policy insights. So in terms of next steps, for interested students and other stakeholders. This trip will take place, as I mentioned, October 4th through the 12th, which is fall break 2025. The scholarship deadline was March 1st, but we are still taking applications for the program up until June 1st. And we have a few applications already. And just a few things that I kind of want to go back and mention is this is open not only to students but to professionals as well. And when we really think about this issue of cultural humility, it's a lifelong process of learning and self-reflection. And as a social worker who has lived and traveled throughout the world, and particularly in Africa, for in literally my entire life since I was a child. I will say that every time I go, I come away with something different, as well as some growth and some additional learning and understanding. And I think what I gained in this last trip was just a lot of humility for the social workers in the various agencies and what they do, particularly when you think about the needs and the resources that they're working with. But again, I think many times as we're working with students, students tend to jump to all the deficits. And I really want to emphasize like all the strengths and the amazingness and the beauty of this place. And this was actually a picture taken at Hans Botel, which is they have this amazing restaurant there, and the whole thing is outside, and they have like a little area where you can view like crocodiles and birds, and it's just absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. And this will be one of the places that we'll visit during our trip as well. So again, the deadline for applications is June 1st. It's a relatively short turnaround in terms of the review of the applications and the acceptance, and that will happen by June 8th at the very latest. So this is actually a throwback picture. I just really wanted to put this picture in here as we kind of begin the Q&A and closing remarks, to just demonstrate the absolute joy of this place and the kindness and the amazingness of the Ghanaian people. There's a word in TWI, which is the language there. It's called Aquaba, and it means welcome. And everywhere you go, people say Aquaba when they see you. And so this picture was actually taken in 2000, and that's me on the left in the blue. And this was my first trip to Ghana, and to the right is actually my aunt. And if any of you have like a super fun aunt that you love to travel with and go do a lot of things, this is my super fun aunt, and she's actually a retired nurse. She retired just a few months ago, and she worked in the surgery for probably about 30 years or so. And in this place, we're actually at a site called Bonwiri, which is between Accra and Kumasi. And it's a site where they make a particular fabric called adinkra. So you'll see us holding like a stick, and we're actually making the dye for this fabric called the adinkra cloth. So there's sort of a black dye that goes on as you see the cloth, and you can see the cloth in the background. But one of the things I think that's demonstrative about this particular picture is you see all the folks in the background, and they're laughing and having a good time too. And I think that it's really demonstrative of what you'll see in Ghana in terms of the welcoming nature of folks as well. So with that, I am actually going to move to questions and answers. So if you have a question in the chat, and the other thing I didn't get to mention as well is if you want to tell us who you are, I know that you'll have to add that to the chat, but I would love to hear more about who you are, if there's students in the audience, if there are practicum instructors, etc. That would be awesome. If you want to tell us who you are, I'd just love to know. So any questions at this point?
So Tiffany, this is Philip. I think you'll start to see at the Q&A at the bottom, people have started putting questions for you.
Okay. And for some reason, okay, I'm trying to move it with my mouse, but nothing's happening. I'm wondering if I need to stop my share.
And I'm happy to read those if it doesn't show up on your screen.
Yes, I'm not seeing, I can see webinar. Oh, okay. It all of a sudden it just populated. Okay. Um, a couple of folks have told us their name and where they're from. Awesome. So we have Raquel from Family Promise of Ogden, Mary Beth, she's a professional in private practice. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I'll ask Tiffany, do you see a Q&A button at the bottom?
Yes, awesome. Okay. So one question is, in addition to approaching different cultures with a strengths-based perspective, how can we avoid going into economically disadvantaged areas with a savior mentality, particularly if providing services, resources as part of the trip? So that's really a great question, and I really want to go back to this issue around cultural humility. And I think it's really key. And I try to, again, going back to my own experience with this recent planning trip, is really thinking about listening, I think is really critical and important. And to realize that we're there as listeners and participants, and we're there to ask questions and to learn. So we're not the experts on, the Ghanaian people's experiences. So we're really there to figure out, are there ways that we can be of support? Are there ways that we can be of a help while we're there? But again, I think realizing that we're taking a back seat and not trying to come in as a leader or expert, I think is really key. And that's certainly a approach that I took while I was there as well. So I hope that's helpful. And we also have a comment from Don. I know time is short in the trip, but have you considered visiting Ensign Global College of Public Health in Kampong? The U has a very good relationship with them. So yes, Don, that is something we thought about, but it's a really short trip. It's a really, really short trip. We just don't have the time to make that kind of a trip, unfortunately. So that is something that we did consider and think about. We're also talking about the development of some other relationships. We want to develop some additional research partnerships with folks at KNUST. Some of that is already going on with our current faculty. I know Karen Frost, who is our Associate Dean for Research, is also working with some of the folks in Ghana and some folks in public health on some research projects. We'd like to expand those partnerships. At some point, we had some exchanges with students who were doing practicum. So we had individuals who were coming from Ghana who were coming to Salt Lake City to work in some social service agencies here. And we were sending students, and I particularly mentioned Safe Child Advocacy in Kumasi. We actually have had students placed there as well for supplemental practicum in the past. So that may be something that we can build upon if students are going back for more enhanced time, is looking at some of the resources with the Ensign Global College and connecting them and see if there are opportunities to shadow in some of the public health sites there. I know there are some great relationships with some of the medical facilities, and there are also folks in the physician assistant, the PA program, as well as the School of Medicine that have long-term relationships that have developed. So these are really long and rich relationships. So there is a lot to explore. But again, I just feel like we're a little limited because the trip is so short. Um, so somebody said, can you repeat what kind of agencies will be visited on the trip? So again, we're looking at social and child welfare agencies and hospitals. So we're planning on at least 4 visits to community-based agencies, and these would all take place in Kumasi, which is sort of in the center of the country. And those are being arranged through our relationship with our partner, the Kwame Nkrumah University for Science and Technology. Okay, I don't see any other questions. We have a couple of more comments. One from Danae Cook. Hi, Danae. I think we've met before. And she says, just excited about this work. She's been to Ghana twice. Once is in 2018. Awesome. So I hope that you'll be able to join us. Any other questions? We have about 10 minutes remaining. So Jen asked what sort of vaccinations are needed for this trip. And Jen, I'm not a medical expert, so I don't want to take this question and then forget something out. So here's what I would recommend. As part of the planning for this trip, students will need to go to U of U Health, either there or to the Madsen Clinic. They have a really great travel clinic as well. I've been to both of these places for various trips to Africa. And they will make sure that based on your medical history and record that you have all of the needed shots. So, for example, I know yellow fever is a required shot by the Ghanaian government, and they will not let you in the country unless you have a record of the yellow fever. So there are some other shots that the travel clinic will recommend as well. And you will also need to take a malaria pill prior to leaving, have a prescription. You usually start at 1 to 2 days before you leave, and then you take it up to 7 days after you return. So again, that will be part of the pre-departure planning information that will be provided. The other thing that I want to mention too is if you're an American citizen, which I would guess that most of the folks who are traveling on this trip are going to be, that there is a visa required, and it does take quite a bit of time to get the visa. So if you're just thinking or contemplating going on this trip and you don't yet have a US passport, I would go ahead and start working on that. Or if your passport is expired, start working on getting a renewed passport. And I'll just say, in my experience, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, my husband and I were planning a trip where we visited Senegal and Cape Verde. It was absolutely amazing. Um, But one of the things was my passport was about to expire, and I got, ordered a new passport about 6 months in advance. And it was literally down to the wire. I did not get my passport till about the week before I was supposed to leave. And I'm saying that to say you're going to need more time because you have to also marshal the visa process. And you probably, I would give yourself at least 2 months before departure to complete the visa process. So you need to have your passport in advance of that. So really, really critical if you're even thinking about going on this trip and you don't have a passport, or you will not have at least 6 months left on your passport at the time of travel. You really need to start working to get a new passport immediately. Yes, and thanks so much, Jen. Jen Nazawa, she put into the chat for us links for learning abroad at Utah. So that also has a link to more information as well as how to apply for the program, as well as the information to the travel clinic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Um, I have told Tiffany I'm like ecstatic that I might get to be the faculty member who goes along. I don't know. We'll see how that works out. But just to reiterate what Tiffany said, that there are I can't remember the term they use. It's like attending observers or something like that. That faculty and community members have the opportunity to fund their way and join on the trip, which I think would be really just an incredible opportunity. So Tiffany, thank you so much. I can't imagine anybody else better situated to lead students on what will obviously be just an amazing opportunity. So to everyone who joined us today, thank you for being here. For attendees who are seeking continuing education hours, please watch your email in the coming days. You'll get a link to the recorded presentation and a brief quiz. And then upon successful completion of the quiz, an automated confirmation of CEU hours will be emailed to you. We hope you will join us again for our next Social Work Beyond the Classroom event, which will be held on Tuesday, April 1st. One of our newer faculty members, Josh Kivlevitz, will talk about bridging the gap between lived experiences and standards of care for people experiencing suicidal thoughts and feelings. You can find video recordings, CEU quizzes, and details about all of our events on the college's events webpage, which is now being linked in the chat. And with that, I want to say thank you to Dr. Baffour. Thank you to all of our attendees. Thank you to the staff who put the event together. And thank you for being a part of this event. And I ask that you be kind, be safe, and be well. Thank you so much, everyone.